Please help me welcome to the University of Michigan, Mr. Brooks.
I'm taking this off, I'm getting strangled. Okay. Now you can see my hairline. Well, University of Michigan class of 2023, it's an honor and a pleasure to be with you. I come here on a mission. Over the years, I've observed that no group of alumni in America are as fervently in love with their school as are the alumni of the University of Michigan. You will spend the next 60 years wearing Michigan scarves, Michigan hats, Michigan license plates, boring your friends about University of Michigan. You're not graduating from a university, you're joining a cult. Second, I've come to be present at this moment for you guys, a momentous transition in your lives. You've spent most of your lives so far as students. You've had to spend your years trying to please grumpy teachers, doing pointless assignments, and your top obsession each year is whether Michigan beats Ohio State. Now you enter the real world, which is totally different. From now on, you will spend your years trying to please grumpy bosses, doing pointless assignments, and your top obsession each year is whether Michigan beats Ohio State. You know this day is real because you were hungover, your parents are proud, your professors are shocked, and I'm in awe. Over the course of your years at Michigan, you've learned many new things. You've learned to dominate classroom discussion while doing none of the reading. You've learned to spend as much as 15 seconds slaving over a term paper with ChatGPT. You learned the skill of staring at me right now with what looks like expressions of rapt attention, even though you are in fact completely asleep. Whenever I'm honored to give addresses to graduating classes, I try to pass along a few pieces of valuable information. First, this may be your first graduation. And so you should know that when you get your degree, it's customary to tip President Ono just to show him he did a good job. 10 or 20 bucks should be fine. For the commencement speaker, something in the low four figures. Higher for Ross graduates. The other ritual of these exercises is that the school picks a person who has some career success to give a speech saying career success doesn't really matter. Several years ago, it was the fashion for people like Steve Jobs and J.K. Rowling to give addresses on how much you can learn from failure. From this, you learn that failure is wonderful if you happen to be Steve Jobs and J.K. Rowling. My advice is don't fail. Today, as I look over at your cheerful faces, I can't help but to think back to my own years in college. When I was 18, the admissions officers at Columbia, Wesleyan, and Brown decided I should go to the University of Chicago. I got a great education there while pursuing a double major in history and celibacy. I'd like to pass along the life-altering advice of my own commencement speaker, but unfortunately I can't because I don't remember a thing that guy said. You, on the other hand, are at a gorgeous moment in your lives. You're wiser than the freshmen, you're sexier than the faculty. In fact, you're a lot sexier than the faculty. Plus, you have long, exciting years ahead of you. Think of where you will be in 60 years. Donald Trump and Joe Biden will still be running for president. The Rolling Stones will still be on tour. Billie Eilish will still be unhappy. Taylor Swift will have moved on from football players and will be dating the Supreme Court. You have two incredible paths before you. One leads to a soulless job as a cog in a corporate machine. The other leads to permanent residence in your parents' basement. I'm here to help you explore these exciting possibilities. The usual cliches of this sort of address are pretty familiar. Follow your passion, take risks, listen to your inner voice, be true to yourself, your future is limitless. First, my generation leaves you with a mountain of debt, and then we give you a bunch of career derailing advice that will prevent you from ever paying it off. I'm going to start with some practical advice, which I got from either the Bible or Reddit. This is grade A practical advice. The thing that made you weird as a kid is going to make you wonderful as an adult. Ignores what others might think about you because they are not thinking about you. When you're in your 20s, say yes to everything because you never know where something will lead. When you're 90% done a big project, finishing the rest of the details will take another 90%. Just because it's not your fault doesn't mean it's not your responsibility. Finally, pick 10 of your closest college friends or graduate school friends and form a giving circle. Put some money in a pot, and every year get together to figure out how to give the money away. The charity of this part will be nice, but the real reason to do it is to have 10 friends from Michigan you can carry with you for the rest of your lives. That will matter. These are useful life hacks that can make you more effective as a human being, but I'm here today mostly to talk about your larger destiny. Every generation faces a central challenge, a historical summons which they are called to solve and address. We boomers generously left your generation a whole bunch of problems to solve. You can thank us later. The biggest challenge your generation faces, I believe, is the breakdown of the morals and social fabric of our society. As a society, we've grown steadily sadder and meaner over the past few years. Rising depression, mental health problems, rising suicide rates, the foreboding statistics go on and on. The number of Americans who say they have no close friends has risen 4 times since 2000. The amount of time Americans spend with their friends has dropped 60% over that time. The share of Americans without a romantic partner is up by 1/3. The sadness of America leads to the meanness of America. When people feel unseen, invisible, unrecognized, they regard it as an injustice, which it is, and so they lash out. People who feel invisible come to dislike the world and they want revenge. You get rising hate crimes, gun violence, mass shooters, racism. Social trust is at rock bottom. It used to be that 2/3 of Americans gave to charity. Now fewer than half do. The growing meanness of public life shows up in our politics, in the brutal rhetoric, the way people organize their thinking into crude categories: real Americans versus elites, oppressors versus oppressed, colonizers versus the colonized. The crude categories are dehumanizing because they cover over the complex realities of actual people. A few months ago, I was doom scrolling through social media, looking at the brutal confrontations on campuses and the horrific images from the Middle East. Suddenly, I came across a short video of an interview the great writer James Baldwin must have given sometime in the 1960s. He said, "The world is held together by the love of relatively few people. There is not as much humanity in the world as one would like to see, but there is more than one would think. There is enough." Then he continued, "Walk down the street of any city, any afternoon, and look around you. What you've got to remember is what you're looking at is also you. Everyone you're looking at is also you. You could be that person." Here, amid the Twitter flow of dehumanization, was the image of a man who was a defiant humanist. Here was a person emphasizing our common humanity, who has committed himself amidst a lot of hatred that he must have encountered through the course of his life, and bigotry, to see others in all their mystery and complexity, to see the world from another's point of view. It seems to me the times are calling on your generation to offer that kind of defiant humanism. In the midst of war and conflicts, foreign and domestic, it seems to me that we're called not to be calloused over and brutal, but to see each other generously and to try to treat each other with consideration and respect. Human beings need recognition as much as they need food and water. If you're going to be a decent person in brutalizing times, You have to resolve to give the gift of attention. It is to say to the people around you, I will try to see you in all your complexity. I will try to understand you. I will try to see the world even just a little from your point of view. The first gift you can offer is the gift of focus. If you're talking to someone, make your attention an on-off switch, not a dimmer. Give them 100% of your attention. Don't try to 60% it. The second gift is the gift of empathy. That's seeing what the other person needs in any situation and not what you need. Rabbi Elliot Kukla once told a story of a woman who had suffered a brain injury and sometimes fell to the ground. And people would rush to immediately get her back on her feet. She told Kukla, I think people rush to help me up because they're so uncomfortable with seeing an adult lying on the floor. But what I really need at that moment is for somebody to get down on the floor with me. And so there are times when we just have to get down on the floor with another human being, literally or metaphorically. The third gift is the gift of presence. Sometimes you just need to show up for people. A few years ago, I read about a professor named Nancy Abernathy, who was teaching a seminar when her husband died suddenly of a heart attack while cross-country skiing. With some difficulty, she managed to get through the semester and carry on with her teaching. One day, she mentioned to her class that she was dreading teaching the same course the next year because during the first meeting, she asked everybody to bring in the family photos so they can get to know one another. She wasn't sure she could bring in photos of her late husband without weeping. Summer came and went, and the fall arrived, and the day of the dreaded class. Abernathy entered the lecture hall filled with trepidation, and then realized something. The classroom was too crowded. Sitting there, along with her current class, were the students from the previous year's class. They had come simply to lend their presence during a hard time. They knew exactly what she needed, and they didn't need to offer more. This is compassion, Abernathy later reported, a simple human connection between one who suffers and one who would heal. The fourth gift is the gift of curiosity. I've come to think that the act of asking people questions is a moral act. You're adopting a posture of humility. You're showing respect, honoring the person. I want to see you. I want to know you a little. Sometimes I leave a party and I think, that whole time nobody asked me a question. I've come to believe that only about 30 or 40% of the humans are question askers. So I advise you to be part of that 30 or 40%. The fifth gift is the gift of conversations. Most of us are not good at the art of conversation as we think we are. A good conversation is not two people making statements at each other. That's a bad conversation. A good conversation exists on two levels. There's the subject we're nominally talking about, and that there's the emotional flow underneath us. With every comment I make, I'm either making you feel safer or less safe, more respected or less. For example, some people ruin a conversation by becoming what they call a topper. If you say to me, I had a horrible flight, we waited on the tarmac for 2 hours, my instinct is to say, I know exactly what you went through. I had a horrible flight. I waited on the tarmac for 4 hours. It sounds like I'm trying to relate to you, but what I'm really doing is saying, let's stop talking about you and let's talk about me and my superior experiences. Don't be a topper. The sixth gift is the gift of vulnerability, the ability to reveal vulnerability in friendship at an appropriate pace. The novelist Frederick Buechner once wrote, it's important to tell, at least from time to time, the secret of who you fully and truly are, because otherwise we run the risk of losing track of who we fully and truly are and come to accept the highly edited version that we put forth in the hope the world will find it more acceptable. It's important to tell our secrets because it makes it easier for other people to tell their secrets too. Finally, the seventh gift is the gift of wisdom. My view of wisdom has changed over the years. I used to think a wise person is a lofty sage who doles out maxims like Yoda or Dumbledore. The wise person knows how to solve problems, give you good advice. Now I sort of take the opposite view. The wise person and the wise people in our lives don't tell us what to do. They just start by witnessing our story. They see us in a noble struggle. They take in your story and they accept it and push you to clarify it. What is it you really want? What baggage have you left out of your clean tail? Wise people don't tell you what to do. They create a hospitable atmosphere in which people are encouraged to set aside fear and realize what they need to achieve and who they really are. You may remember a scene in the movie Good Will Hunting where the therapist, played by Robin Williams, pulls aside the math whiz, played by Matt Damon. And he tells him, "You're a tough kid. I ask you about war, you'll probably throw Shakespeare at me, right? Once more into the breach, dear friends. But you've never been near one. You've never held your best friend's head in your lap and watched him gasp his last breath. I ask you about love, you probably quote me a sonnet, but you've never looked at a woman and been totally vulnerable. I look at you, I don't see an intelligent, confident man. I see a cocky, scared kid. I can't learn anything from you that I can't read in some book. Unless you want to talk about you, who you are, then I'd be fascinated. I'm in. But you don't want to do that, do you, sport? You're terrified of what you might say." Now that speech, which I've not read as well as Robin Williams did, flows from great listening. The Robin Williams character has heard the one thing the Matt Damon character is desperate to hide, that he's terrified of life. The therapist lays that on the table and says, "I see you, it's going to be okay." Furthermore, the therapist is offering a critique with care. He's saying there are two kinds of knowledge. There's the kind you get from books, which is the kind that he has, the Matt Damon character. And then there's the kind you get from life, from being vulnerable to life to being adventurous in life. The Robin Williams character is saying that's the kind of knowledge you need, the kind of available only to those who are truly open themselves emotionally and spiritually to all that life has to offer. University of Michigan class of 2023, I imagine you've absorbed a lot of book learning while you're here in Ann Arbor. I don't denigrate it. I've spent my life trying to cram information into books. But now comes time for the sort of personal knowledge that is only won by brave living. With all the problems the world faces, you may be wondering why I focus things that are so intimate and so small, paying attention to someone, asking a few questions. I did it because the touchstone of being a moral person is being a genius at the close at hand. It's the act of being considerate to the people in complex circumstances of life. Now, you may wonder if I'm being naive, telling you to be open and vulnerable in such a sad and mean environment. If I'm vulnerable, won't I be betrayed? Yes, you most assuredly will, from time to time. But I assure you that acting in this way I recommend is hard and practical. It's best to lead with trust. It's best to lead with curiosity. It's not naive to lead with respect. It's practical to be able to understand the people around you, to make them feel respected and lit up. The essayist David White once wrote that the ultimate touchstone of friendship, he wrote, is not improvement, neither of the other or the self. Rather, he wrote, the ultimate touchstone of friendship is witness, the privilege of having been seen by someone else, and the equal privilege of being granted the sight of the essence of another. To have walked with them, to have believed in them, sometimes just to have accompanied them for however brief a time, on a journey impossible to accomplish alone. You've learned a lot here at the University of Michigan. I hope you've learned most of all to keep your friends close. Go Blue.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for David Brooks one more time. Thank you so much for your 7 gifts, especially the last one of wisdom. Much appreciated. And in listening to your remarks about forever wondering who's going to win, Michigan or Ohio State, I remember when I was actually moving to the University of Michigan, a friend of mine from Ohio, I won't name the person, a very prominent individual in Ohio, said, you know, that's what's going to happen every year, and you may not win that often. Well, you know, I actually called him up just the other day, and I said, remember that conversation? Can you say three-peat?